Right now, if a human worker does, $50,000 worth of work in a factory, that income is taxed. If a robot comes in to do the same thing, you'd think that we'd tax the robot at a similar level.
Bill Gates has recently chimed in on a call for robots to start paying taxes. Now, he is by no means the first person to call for this, but he is certainly the most high profile, and as such, a lot of people have started to talk about it. The Reddit post alone in the r/futurology subreddit has received a staggering 47,800 upvotes at the time of writing, making it one of the most popular postings in the Reddit's history. Taxing robots has a lot of romantic appeal. It allows for income to be generated without humans doing any work, which frees up time for the creative and caring activities that we all know and love. Furthermore, the word robot comes from the Slavic word robota, which means forced labourer, and which under the medieval feudal system is essentially a slave. The idea of a slave providing us with service as well as income to fund our activities, but without any of the downsides of stripping away an individual's humanity and forcing them to experience abject poverty, is quite understandably appealing. It is, of course, also rather topical. With the incoming driverless car revolution that is set to cause phenomenal levels of unemployment, the technology industry as a whole is very keen to find solutions to this problem in order to preserve its reputation as the good guys. But my god, like all such utopian ideas, it is phenomenally stupid. There are a great many problems. Firstly, how much tax should these robots actually pay? In the video shown in the intro, Bill Gates talks about a factory worker providing around $50,000 worth of work. Well, is that in itself true? It's very difficult in any organisation to ascribe revenue to a particular individual, which is why there are so many disputes in every single industry about pay. But let's assume that this problem is solved. A human doesn't pay tax based on the revenue or profit generated for the company. They pay tax on what they take home as an income. It's a tax on the labour cost of the company. Robots don't have a labour cost, they have a capital cost and a maintenance cost. Which figure should be taxed? Should we hypothecate a fictional wage for each robot based on the revenue they produce? The ease of replacing a robotic employee with a newer model and whether the robot is threatening unionised action or not? Perhaps we should tax the capital cost. Well, we do that already, it's called a sales tax. What about the maintenance cost? Well, again, we do that already. We tax the people who fix stuff, and we tax or indeed subsidise the cost of energy. It is quite a complicated problem, and one that will have to be repeated for each company, each job, and each robot all individually. Assuming that this is in fact possible, it would require no doubt reams and reams of legislation and a small army of workers in order to figure it all out. At least you might say this would create some jobs, no doubt paid for by the robot tax that they are in fact administrating. The bigger problem though comes in how to actually define a robot in the first place. The EU of all things actually recently gave this a go and recommended a bunch of preemptive regulations to try and tame the emergent robotics market and introduce an EU-wide robot tax. The tax was eventually removed from the proposal, which has passed now on Thursday the 16th of February, but regulatory proposals went through. Now, putting aside the logic of drafting legislation for a currently non-existent industry and set of products aside, they defined a robot in the following ways. 1. The capacity to acquire autonomy through sensors and or by exchanging data with its environment, interconnectivity, and the analysis of those data. 2. The capacity to learn through experience and interaction. 3. The form of the robot's physical support. 4. The capacity to adapt its behaviours and actions to its environment. I would suggest that points 1 and 4 are extremely similar and basically mean the ability to observe and then act upon those observations. Point 2 is common to more or less all modern AIs as they all are based on some form of machine learning. Point 3 is perhaps the oddest one though, as it makes specific reference to a physical presence. Now sure, defining that if something is to be called a robot, then it has to be physically interactable makes it a lot easier to identify and then subsequently regulate. But is it an accurate description of a robot? Not at all. A robot is really any sort of computational procedure that replaces the work of a human. Robots have been replacing humans in high-tech fields for a very long time. To see it clearly, look at the difference between writing a computer program in assembly compared to Python. Both programs here do exactly the same job, but a human using Python can write this program dramatically faster. The Python compiler is essentially a more advanced interpretive robot than the assembly one. As is true in programming, the same is true of office tasks. Imagine an old world office. You conjure up the image of banks of secretaries hitting away at their typewriters. The robot Microsoft Word replaces several of these secretaries entirely. Once upon a time, Yahoo was the dominant search engine. They employed hundreds of people to manually trawl through the web and add their findings to the search database. Google eclipsed them with only 2 employees and their web crawling robot in a matter of months. Legal clerks are now being replaced by rudimentary AI. Stock traders were replaced with algorithmic traders years ago. These are all examples of robots without any physical form that have replaced humans almost entirely, and they are not taxed, and in most cases they are not even regulated. How could we apply a tax to such actions? Do we draw a line at the limits of human efficiency and tax any object or algorithm that enables a task to be finished faster than this? Who decides where this line is? Does this line move over time? What happens to robots that replace other robots? Are they taxed to a greater degree, in which case you'll end up with eventually really efficient robots that are taxed so heavily it is cheaper to use a large number of less efficient robots instead, or indeed less efficient humans. In short, a tax on robots is almost impossible to implement and is outlandishly subjective in its implementation, and this is bound to stifle all attempt at further technological innovation. We will have to find another solution.